from Columbia in high definition. This is WIS News 10 Awareness.
A big decision for voters in Columbia just days away. Two candidates vying for the city's highest elected position. Today, they give a final push before you go to the polls. Good morning and thanks so much for joining us this morning for Awareness. I'm your host, Megan Norman. Columbia's municipal election is on Tuesday, and 4 city offices are up for grabs. For District 1, Sam Davis is up against Bruce Tresvant. Leona Plow and Todd Walker are vying for the District 4 seat. For the at-large seat, Tamika Isaac Devine and Tommy Burkett. And Mayor Steve Benjamin is looking to be re-elected. He's up against City Councilman Mo Badura. Mr. Badura will be joining us just a little bit later on, but first we start with the incumbent Mayor Steve Benjamin. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Glad to be here, Megan.
Now, the first topic we want to talk about with you today is public safety. Obviously, a very big priority and concern for you. Recently, a lot of violence in the news, and one of those shootings that happened at the Colony Apartments, where 4-year-old Zahara Walker was hit by a stray bullet while watching cartoons. Now, she and her family have since relocated, but that does not mean that any of the violence has stopped or dissipated in that area. So what's being done in that area specifically to stop the crime?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, we've been in the Colony and in Belvedere neighborhood right next to it a whole lot. Actually, WIS News has covered some of the efforts that we've been working on, a multi-pronged approach to dealing with some of the issues over there with youth violence, youth and gang violence. Of course, you know, I was intimately involved with Zahara's situation and worked closely with the family to make sure they got relocated. We've redoubled our law enforcement patrols over there, opened a new police substation. But I will tell you, the efforts that we've been pushing the last several weeks talking about gang injunctions, the problems that the Colony may face, just like other neighborhoods around the city, is that the folks who are causing the problems, they don't live in those communities. We have this idea we're promoting, starting in California, called a gang injunction that would stop active, known, repeat violent offenders from frequenting and causing problems in several other neighborhoods in which they're doing that. The issue that law enforcement faces, and I'll tell you that Richland County Sheriff's Department, City of Columbia Police Department, our officers all around this region are working very hard to keep our community safe. They arrest folks who commit violent crimes. The challenge is that usually many of those folks are walking through a revolving door. We're seeing repeat violent offenders come back on the street, and we've asked the state for some relief, for some new laws that would stop someone who's out on bond for a violent crime from coming back on the street. But as it relates to law enforcement overall, the year before I came into office, the city cut about $12 million in public safety funding. Every year since I've been mayor, we've added $8 million more to the public safety budget, police department and fire department. This past budget, we put an additional $1.8 million. I voted for it. My opponent in this race voted against it. We moved forward and trying to use these security cameras that have worked very well in 5 points in other parts of the city, approved a plan to put 800 more cameras across the city that help us solve crimes and in some cases may help us prevent crimes. It's an aggressive plan. Again, I proposed and voted for, and my opponent voted against it. We've quadrupled the size of our gang unit, dealing with some of these major issues. But if we're going to get to the core of dealing with violent crime and dealing with some of these young people who have an opportunity to take the road that so many of our young people are taking, the road less traveled by, we've got to also start investing more in young people from the beginning. I have a plan that we're putting forward to my colleagues very soon that talks about ways in which we can begin to rebuild a community around our young people. Put an active Pop Warner football league in every park in the city, Dixie Youth Baseball League. Making sure we have a police athletic league active where kids can play basketball with police officers and develop relationships, and also putting soccer teams in every city. We can pay for that, Megan. It's amazing. We can pay for that for less than what we're paying for a separate election in December to have the Strong Mayor referendum. It's doable. It's smart investing, and it helps keep our community safer.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the perception of crime, because the crime stats show that violent crime is down across the city, but yet people don't feel safe. I talk to them on the streets daily, and they feel like it's an unsafe community in some parts. And part of that perception, when you look at it, is talking about the police department. There isn't a permanent police chief in place. Do you believe that there needs to be one now, or are you still waiting until the SLED investigation is complete?
You're very right that crime and the perception of crime are two very different things. 4 years ago, we had 16 homicides in the city of Columbia. We have only 7 this year, down well over 50%. But that's still 7 too many. And we're a much more connected society than we once were as well, with social media and media coverage of certain events. It heightens everyone's concerns, and it should be. You know, we need to work as hard as we can to deal with the issue, particularly of violent crime in our community. And I believe that having a permanent police chief, which we all want, is certainly a priority. You understand under this form of government that the mayor nor any members of city council select the police chief. Under the council manager form of government, that's purely the prerogative of the city manager. But it certainly would add stability to the department. However, I want to make it clear that the men and women of the Columbia Police Department are working their tails off every single day. I mean, the arrest reports will show that they're picking up folks who are causing crimes. I mean, some of the every single homicide that's been committed in this city, they've closed the case. They've arrested those folks. The question is, will the system keep them behind bars? And that's something that we have a panel that you may know. WIS News has covered it this week. Chief Robert Stewart, along with Sheriff Lott and others, are serving on the mayor's violent crime and bond reform task force. We're asking for some long-term permanent solutions to shut this revolving door. One of the most heinous crimes committed this past summer. This young man, repeat violent offender, was facing 14 open charges. He'd been arrested in Columbia, been arrested in Richland County, been arrested in Forest Acres, and yet he was still back on the street with an illegal weapon. And we've got to find some way to shut that revolving door. The officers are working hard, and I believe that stability at the top of the department is certainly a priority that we all want to see happen. But as you well know, the SLED investigation is continuing into some allegations that were made this summer, and many of us thought it prudent to wait until that investigation was over, before the city manager would move forward. Still think it's prudent, but we hope it will happen post haste.
Okay. Well, Mayor Benjamin, finally we want to give you the opportunity to address viewers right now and tell them why they should vote for you on November 5th.
Well, I appreciate that, Megan. The last 4 years have been a true blessing. I've had the opportunity to live the American dream. My parents worked hard to give me an opportunity to do the great things that God had in store for me, make sure I got a good education and make sure I had food, shelter, safety, security. It's my job as the mayor of the city not to raise every child, but to make sure that every child has the same opportunities I had. We've worked for the last several years to balance the budget 4 years in a row, have a budget surplus. We've dropped violent crime 30%. We're continuing investing in revitalizing downtown and Bull Street, other opportunities. This is our time, Columbia, and I appreciate your opportunity for 4 more years.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First a businessman, then a Columbia City Councilman. Now Mo Badura is looking to go all the way to the top of city government. Up next, Badura with his stance on the issues. Stay with Awareness on the Columbia municipal election. Welcome back. Joining us now is Councilman Mo Badura. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
A very big priority for you has been public safety. Let's talk a little bit about how you plan to keep the city safe citywide, not just in certain hot spots.
Good question. And the first, we have to start by hiring a police chief. May this year, I've asked the city manager to start the process of hiring the police chief because that's what we need. We need a police chief and his department because that is our first line of defense against criminals that means it's harm. Mayor Benjamin promised that he was going to keep our city safe 4 years ago when he first got elected, and you know, the city is not safer now than it was when he first got elected. Actually, people feel that the city and the mayor has failed them when it comes to public safety because he hasn't paid attention and prioritizing public safety first. You know, he's concentrating on making development deals rather than concentrating on making our city safe, rather than making plans and addressing the gang issues that we have in the city. Until 2 weeks ago when I called and I made a statement that we have a gang problem in Columbia, the mayor never made that statement. He's never gone after gangs and how to fight gangs. And he's had the report since the day he was elected. It's the same report that I found out about 2 weeks ago. And that's what worries me. His priorities are not in order to serve the public and make them feel safe, and represent the people of Columbia.
Now, you mentioned you had asked for the search for a police chief to start back in May. SLED investigation still ongoing. Why not wait until that investigation is completed?
If you remember, when I requested to start the process for hire a police chief, it was before the allegation, before the investigation was even started. So if the process would have started back then, I think we would have had a police chief back then. We wouldn't have had to wait until the investigation. But let's just not let the public and the city of Columbia residents suffer because of the investigation report. Let's go ahead and start the process and name a permanent police chief so he can have a plan how to protect our city.
Do you think qualified applicants are going to want to apply knowing what is going on?
You know, once again, the process should have started back in May. And you know, I'm not worried about qualified or not qualified. I need presentation. I need a representational leadership in the police department. Can bring me a plan to city council, can bring the plan to mayor, so we can help them and give them all the tools they need. Whether it's passing an ordinance, whether they need more cars, more pay. I need a representation from a leader that represents and watches out or looks out for the citizens of Columbia and the police department.
Now, you claim that the current mayor has a more reactive form of leadership or approach to leadership, and that you have a proactive form of leadership. How exactly are you planning on being proactive when it comes to leading the city and protecting the city?
By being involved with everyday citizens, by being involved and communicating with everybody to understand what the issues are. I don't have to have a press conference after a shooting has happened for me to be proactive. It's been years when the mayor was elected 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago. He made a promise that public safety would be #1 issue. And it hasn't been on his plate. It's been about passing Bull Street. It's about buying a Palmetto Compressed building. It's about everything else except public safety. And that's what we need to concentrate on. That's how you can be proactive. Go knock on 10,000 doors and find out what the issues are. And that's what I've done. I've knocked on over 10,000 doors to address the concerns and communicate with the public what are the concerns or what we need to be focusing on for the next 4 years. And I'm the man to do the job.
Okay, so public safety a big concern, but what about economic development?
You know, if without a safe city, you're not going to have economic development. If you tell me that there's a company that's going to come with a violent crime everywhere in Columbia, I don't think that's going to happen. So we need to address one priority after the other. #1, we have to bring a safe city to Columbia. We have to understand that being a safe city will make economic growth grow. A safe city will bring better schools. A safe city will bring better neighborhoods. A safe city will increase the population of Columbia. And that's what we need to start. The foundation of any city government, it starts with a public safety and how we act on public safety and what we can do to make our city safe.
Now, on December 3rd, we will be having a special election for the strong mayor referendum. Where do you stand on the strong mayor form of government?
I'm not supportive of the strong mayor form of government. I think we need checks and balances, and that's what the kind of government we have right now. I don't think I need to change a form of government to have a police chief and a safe city. I don't think I need to change a form of government to prioritize the needs and the fundamental services that we need for public safety and public in general and everybody that lives in the city. So it's not the form of government. It's the mayor's decision that he can control a lot of the issues that and a lot of priorities that we need to address in the city.
So you think just being 1 of 7 votes is enough?
It's not a one vote, it is the leadership that brings to council and how you address the agenda and how you line up the agenda for the next 4 years as a mayor and representation of the city. And that's what we need. We need a different leadership. We need a man that can prioritize public safety and put people first before anything else.
Now, council initially, or recently I should say, voted to increase the mayor's salary. What about council members' salary? Would you be in support of?
I was not in that conversation. I had to recuse myself from the show. I wasn't in the conversation at all.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Baddour. Now you have a chance to address viewers directly and tell them why they should vote for you on November 5th.
I'm the right man for the job because after 10,000 doors knocking and communicating with the public, I understand what we need. We need to make sure that we have a safe city. We need to make sure that priority number one is public safety. We need to make sure that the City of Columbia residents do not have to worry about their water bill is going up every year. We need to understand that the mayor and everybody else uses the water and sewer infrastructure as a slush fund, and we need to stop that now before it's too late.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When awareness returns, no updates since 1989. Now the Richland County Library is asking voters to greenlight a renovation with a large price tag. How that cost would be passed on to you. Voters in Richland County will also be deciding whether to give the Richland Library $59 million, funds it says would be necessary to stay up to date. The last time the library system saw a widespread overhaul was back in 1989. Each of the library's 11 locations will be getting substantial renovations if the referendum passes. In the main library branch on Assembly Street, a new heating and air system, a redesign of the main entrance, and several new meeting spaces. Joining us now is Antoine Seawright with VoteForOurLibraries.com and Melanie Huggins with the Richland Library. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Sure, thanks.
So first, let's talk about what changes we'll be seeing overall.
Well, the wonderful thing about our library and our community is that they have shown an investment in the people that voted in 1989, had this incredible foresight to vote for the bond referendum then. And so now we're 24 years later, and our libraries are very well loved and we're well used, but times have changed and the way that people use the space has changed. So we really want to make an investment for the next 30 years. And the kind of things that we know that people need are places to gather. We need meeting room space, tutoring space, spaces for teens to be after school, places for young people and parents to be. So we have a lot of ideas, but when the bond passes, we want to make sure that we're checking in with the community to make sure that what we're doing reflects their needs.
Okay, and this is $59 million. How will taxpayers be seeing this money? How will they be paying for it?
Well, here's how I describe it to people, and it's very simple. It's $12 to $14 per year on your taxes if your home is worth $100,000 or more. So to put that in perspective, that's the equivalent to 2 extra value meals from McDonald's that you will be asked to spend to change a generation in the face of Richland County Libraries. And so for me, that's a no-brainer. I don't think you can put a cost on transforming generations to come.
Now, there's a group, Not Another Tax Increase, that obviously opposes this bond referendum, and it's saying, okay, only $12 to $14 a month, but...
No, not a month,
I'm sorry,
a year.
A year. But only $12 to $14 adds up for some people. So is this a necessity or is it just a nicety? This group also talks about these meeting spaces that you don't have to have them. They can meet in other places, churches and community halls.
No, go ahead.
Well, if that was the case, Megan, 2.7 million visitors our library saw in Richland County just last year. I was 4 years old the last time we passed a bond referendum here in Richland County. That says something. As Melanie said earlier, the way we do business, the way we communicate, and the needs of our community have changed drastically since 1989. So, to my friends on the other side, it's easy to say, okay, we do nothing. But what happens when those needs become even greater? And even greater, and even greater. And we've seen over time since 1989, those needs have changed, and they will continue to change.
And Melanie, do you want to weigh in on that? Why is it a necessity?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think this community has proved time and time again that the libraries are necessities, that we do things like improve the quality of life by giving people a safe place to go. We're open to everyone from 9 to 9 at night. We're open when schools are not, when churches are not. We're there for the community no matter what their education needs are and questions, and really we're about lifelong learning. If you want to have a city that has low crime and lots of economic development opportunities, you have a strong library system. That's a major piece of the puzzle. And I'll just, add that we at the library are very sensitive to the fact that we are just now coming out of a really difficult time for personally for families in a recession. We would not be doing this if we didn't think it was necessary, and if we didn't think that right now we can get historically low interest rates that will make the cost of this change so much lower if we wait even a year or 2 years out. So that's why we're doing it now.
Okay, Melanie, Antoine, thank you both so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
Well, we would like to remind you of the candidates on the ballot for Columbia's municipal election on Tuesday: Mayor Steve Benjamin and Mo Badura, District 1, Sam Davis and Bruce Tresvant, District 4, Leona Plow and Todd Walter, and at large, Tamika Isaac Devine and Tommy Burkett. Also, Tuesday is the first major election in South Carolina since the new voter ID law has been in effect. To make sure your vote is counted right away, you will need to show one of the following: a South Carolina driver's license, a DMV identification card, a South Carolina voter registration card with a photo, a federal military ID, or a U.S. passport. If you do not have your ID, do not leave the polling place. You will be able to submit a provisional ballot, and you would be given instructions on how to make sure that vote is counted. We'll be right back with a final thought. To affect change on any level, you must vote in every election: school board, city, county, state, and nationwide. By not taking part in the process, you essentially agree with whatever decisions politicians make. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, quote, "Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be." In other words, we all need to do our part. We would like to thank Steve Benjamin, Mo Badura, Antoine Seawright with VoteForOurLibraries.com, and Melanie Huggins with the Richland Library. Until next time, this is Awareness.